Why did the room laugh before they even knew her name? No one noticed the weight she carried when she walked in. They noticed the ink first. Black lines crawling up her arms like unfinished thoughts, shapes that didn't make sense, marks that looked wrong in a room full of clean uniforms and polished confidence. 40 operators filled the training hall, all muscle and certainty, all convinced they knew what strength looked like. She took a seat in the center row, silent, head down, tightening her boots with slow precision. No rank on her chest, no unit patch. Just a plain black shirt and arms covered in stories no one bothered to read. The laughter didn't come from cruelty. It came from ignorance, from comfort, from the easy habit of judging what doesn't fit. Someone whispered, someone smirked. Someone decided she was decoration, not substance. She felt it, of course. The way eyes lingered too long. The way silence wrapped around her like a test she hadn't asked to take. She stayed still anyway, calm, measured. The way you learn to be when reacting too fast gets people killed. When a voice finally reached her, sharp, amused, careless, it landed without force. A question about her tattoos, about bad decisions, about running from something. She paused mid-lace, just long enough to let the moment breathe. Then she answered quietly. No anger, no defense, just truth. The kind that doesn't explain itself because it doesn't need to. Something shifted in the room. Not enough for respect, just enough for discomfort. They didn't know yet that every line on her skin was a map, that some of those marks had been drawn with blood, that others marked the last place someone she loved was alive. They didn't know that silence for her wasn't weakness, it was survival, and they certainly didn't know that before the day was over, the laughter would disappear completely. The door opened, authority entered, and the test began. The first drill was simple, brutal but simple, a weighted dummy, full kit, drag it across the hall. No countdown, no encouragement, just expectation. She moved like she'd done this before, not fast, efficient, every motion deliberate, breath steady, pain managed, not ignored. When she finished in half the expected time, no one clapped. They just watched, confused now, recalculating. The second test assaulted the senses. Noise, chaos, patterns shifting too fast for comfort. Most people flinched. She didn't. She leaned in, focused, finished again. By the third drill, the room had gone quiet for a different reason. Suspicion, curiosity, a creeping realization that they had misjudged something fundamental. When she identified the hidden threat in the tactical simulation without hesitation, the instructor didn't smile. He nodded. That was worse. That meant truth. She returned to her seat without a word, and the silence followed her. But silence has a way of inviting the wrong kind of courage. Outside, during the break, the laughter tried to come back. 3 men drifted toward her like gravity owed them space. Questions again, jokes again. One reached out, touched the ink, claimed familiarity he hadn't earned. Her response was immediate, controlled, absolute. Don't touch me. Not a threat, a fact. He froze, because for the first time that day he felt it, the steel beneath the paint. The presence of someone who didn't need permission to exist. She let go, returned to her task, and something irreversible cracked inside him. He just didn't know it yet. Why did the commander nod at her like they shared a history no one else could see? When the senior officer entered, the room snapped to attention out of reflex. Years of conditioning didn't ask questions, they just obeyed. He carried decades in his posture. Loss, command, the weight of decisions that don't leave you. His eyes scanned the room, then stopped on her. Not surprise, recognition. That nod said everything. When he spoke her name, the air changed. Titles followed. Years of service. Missions most people only read about. Decorations that didn't sound real until they echoed in concrete walls. She stood as the truth unfolded, not taller, not prouder, just present. The ink on her arms suddenly felt heavier to everyone who had laughed. She didn't start with heroics. She didn't posture. She started with a question. What do you think strength looks like when everything fails? Then she rolled up her sleeve. The mark they'd mocked, the jagged one, the ugly one, became the center of the room. She told them where it came from. A night mission, bad intel, an ambush, a teammate dying in her arms, a map drawn in blood because there was no paper left and no time, a promise made between breaths, a promise she carved into her own skin so it couldn't be forgotten. No one moved, no one breathed. That tattoo wasn't art, it was memory, navigation, survival. She spoke of carrying bodies, of walking through hostile terrain with injuries that should have stopped her, of choosing not to stop because stopping meant death for her or someone else. She didn't dramatize it. That made it worse. Truth always does. Another tattoo marked coordinates, a place on a map where a signal went dark, where her husband disappeared into history without a body to bury. She carried him now, everywhere. Ink doesn't let you forget. That was the point. By the time she finished, shame sat thick in the room, not loud, heavy, the kind that makes you look inward whether you want to or not. She didn't ask for apologies. She didn't need them. The lesson wasn't about tattoos. It was about assumptions. What happens when strength is tested without witnesses? Night came quietly, the exercise didn't. Navigation, no GPS, no lights, just terrain and decisions, teams formed, routes assigned. The man who had mocked her found himself leading the hardest path, not punishment, assessment. Out there, away from ranks and spectators, leadership revealed itself. When a teammate was injured, the choice came fast: finish and pass, or turn back and fail together. He chose his team. When she stepped out of the darkness to evaluate the decision, her approval was quiet, almost gentle, because he had learned the thing that mattered. That success without integrity is failure wearing a uniform. They walked back together, slower, heavier, but intact. Later, he marked his own skin, not for decoration, for memory, for the moment he learned to see past surface and into substance. Years passed, lessons carried forward, the ink remained. And somewhere out there, a woman with too many tattoos kept walking quietly through the world, carrying maps no one else could read, teaching without demanding attention, proving without explaining. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. Why did the silence feel heavier after she finished speaking than it ever had before? No one rushed to fill it. No one dared. The training hall felt smaller now, like the walls had leaned in to listen. 40 operators sat frozen, eyes forward, minds racing backward through every assumption they'd made in the first 15 minutes of the day. The jokes, the whispers, the easy confidence that said they could spot weakness from across a room, none of it fit anymore. She stood where she'd always stood, centered, grounded, arms relaxed at her sides. The ink on her skin was no longer invisible. It pulsed with meaning now, with cost, with names that didn't get to walk out of rooms anymore. She watched them absorb it, not with satisfaction but with something closer to fatigue. This was the part she hated, not the remembering, not the telling, but the moment right after when people finally understood and didn't know what to do with the knowledge, when respect arrived too late to help the dead, but just in time to bruise the living. She broke the silence without raising her voice. "You think today is about tattoos," she said quietly. "It's not." Her eyes moved across the room, slow, deliberate, landing on faces that had hardened under pressure and softened under truth. It's about what happens when your certainty fails before your body does. Somewhere in the back, a chair creaked as someone shifted. She noticed. She always noticed. "Every one of you has been trained to believe strength is loud," she continued. "That it announces itself, that it flexes, dominates, proves. That's useful until it is." She paused, let them sit in it. "The first time I realized that," she said, "I was pinned in a riverbed with no comms and no way out." She didn't give dates, didn't give unit names. Those details didn't matter here. What mattered was the moment, the decision point, the second when the body begs you to stop and the mind has to decide who you are. She described the terrain, dry earth cracking under heat, the smell of cordite, the sound of breathing that wasn't hers anymore. How fear didn't arrive like panic but like clarity sharpened to a blade. How the loudest voice in her head wasn't screaming, it was calculating. "I didn't feel brave," she said. "I felt responsible." That word landed differently. Responsibility, not glory, not heroism. Responsibility was heavier. It didn't fade when the shooting stopped. Her gaze drifted briefly to the man who had touched her arm outside. She didn't call him out. She didn't need to, he felt it anyway. The way her eyes passed over him without judgment, without malice, and somehow made the shame worse. He sat straighter now, hands clasped, jaw tight, not defiant, listening. "You don't rise to the level of your training," she said. "You fall to the level of your honesty." A few brows furrowed. Good. Confusion meant the lesson was working. She explained how exhaustion lies, how it convinces you that shortcuts are wisdom, how fear disguises itself as logic, how ego whispers that you're the exception, that you can bend rules because you're strong enough to survive the consequences. "Ego gets people killed," she said flatly. No one disagreed. She walked then, not packing, just shifting her position, changing the geometry of the room, making them adjust without realizing it, control without dominance. "Tell me something," she said, stopping near the front row. "How many of you think you'd recognize real strength if it walked in wearing the wrong uniform?" No hands went up, no one answered. The question didn't want an answer, it wanted reflection. She nodded once. "That's what I thought." Her mind flickered not to the room but to another place entirely. A night sky torn open by rotors. A voice in her ear she hadn't heard in years. She pushed it down. "Not now. You learn when to open doors and when to lock them." "Break," the senior officer finally said from the wall. 10 minutes. The spell loosened, but it didn't break. Outside, the sun hit harder than expected. Conversations tried to restart and failed. People drank water they didn't need just to have something to do with their hands. She moved away from them instinctively, finding the edge of shade near the fence. Solitude wasn't avoidance. It was maintenance. She unwrapped her palms slowly. Skin raw, old scars beneath new ones. Her hands told stories her mouth never would. She felt him approach before she heard him. Not aggressive, careful, a man recalibrating. "I didn't know," he said. She didn't look up. "That's rarely the problem," she replied. "Assuming is." He stood there, uncomfortable, uncertain. The silence pressed again. He deserved it. She didn't owe him relief. "I shouldn't have," he started. She raised a hand, stopped him, not harsh, just enough. "Save it," she said. "Apologies are easy when the risk is gone." That stung. It was meant to. She looked at him then, really looked, saw the pride cracking, the beginning of humility, the part that could still be shaped. "You want to make it right?" she asked. He nodded too fast. "Next time," she said, "ask a question instead of making a joke." She turned away. End of exchange. The next drill started without warning. Night navigation, no GPS, no lights, terrain that punished arrogance. Teams formed quickly, orders given. She watched quietly as dynamics revealed themselves. Who talked too much, who listened too little, who stepped up only when eyes were on them. She didn't lead, she observed. From the shadows she tracked their choices, counted their steps, measured their pauses. She knew within minutes who would break first, not physically but internally. The ones who still thought proving something mattered more than bringing people home. When the injury happened, she let it play out. Pain has a way of stripping truth bare. The team leader's face tightened as the choice presented itself. Finish strong or stop together. She stepped forward only when the decision was made. They chose right. That mattered more than the course. Later, when the facility lights flickered back on and exhaustion replaced adrenaline, she stood beside the commander again. Not in front, beside. Equals forged by shared understanding. "They learned," he said quietly. Some of them, she replied. The rest will later or not at all. He nodded, he knew. As the night thinned and people drifted toward sleep, she packed her bag with the same care she packed everything. No rush, no ceremony. She didn't stay for praise, never had. At the door she paused, just once. She looked back at the empty room, at the benches, the floor, the space where ignorance had sat so comfortably just hours earlier. Strength, she thought, isn't about being untouchable. It's about being willing to carry what hurts, quietly, so others don't have to. She stepped out into the cooling air, ink hidden beneath fabric again, stories folded back into skin. And behind her, without realizing it yet, 40 lives had shifted slightly off their old paths. Not because she demanded it. Because truth, once seen, is impossible to unsee. Why did the night feel unfinished, like something important had been left unsaid? The base settled into a strange quiet after midnight, not the calm kind, the thinking kind, the sort that creeps into your chest when your body is exhausted but your mind refuses to shut down. Lights dimmed across the compound, doors closed softly, boots were set neatly beside bunks, but sleep didn't come easily to anyone who'd been in that room earlier. She felt it too. She lay on her back in the small, temporary quarters they'd assigned her. One narrow bed, one chair, a single window cracked open to let the coastal air drift in. The sounds outside were distant, metal doors, far-off footsteps, the low hum of generators that never truly stopped. She stared at the ceiling, hands folded over her stomach, ink hidden beneath fabric, but never truly at rest. Teaching always did this to her. Not because it was hard, but because it peeled open doors she spent years learning how to keep closed. Her mind drifted, not by choice, to a place where nights were louder, where darkness wasn't empty but alive, where silence meant something had gone wrong. She breathed slowly, counted it, in through the nose, out through the mouth, a technique older than any doctrine, one that had saved her more times than she could count. You're here, she reminded herself, this is now. But memory doesn't care about time. She saw hands shaking as they drew lines in dirt, heard breathing that came out wet and uneven, felt weight that shouldn't have been possible to carry but was, always was, because stopping had never been an option. Her jaw tightened, not from pain, from resolve. Across the base, in a different building, Brennan sat on the edge of his bunk fully dressed, boots still on, elbows on his knees. He hadn't even tried to sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her forearm, that jagged map, the casual way she'd rolled her sleeve back down like it was nothing special. Nothing special. The phrase tasted wrong now. He flexed his hands, unclenched them, clenched them again. He'd been trained to analyze after action, to review performance, to extract lessons, but this wasn't tactical. This was internal, and it hurt in a way no ruck march ever had. He'd thought confidence meant certainty. He'd been wrong. Confidence, he was starting to understand, was quiet. It didn't announce itself. It didn't need witnesses. It showed up when everything fell apart and stayed anyway. The image of her stopping him outside replayed again and again. The grip on his wrist, not painful, just immovable, absolute. The look in her eyes, not anger, not fear. Boundaries. He'd crossed one without thinking, because he'd assumed he could. The realization made his stomach turn. Somewhere down the row, Silva lay awake too, staring at the underside of the bunk above him. His ankle throbbed in time with his heartbeat, but that wasn't what kept him awake. It was the memory of choosing silence over honesty, of hiding pain so he wouldn't look weak, of almost costing his team because of it. She'd seen it instantly. Not because she was watching for failure. Because she understood it. Thornton lay still, hands folded over his chest, eyes open in the dark. He kept hearing her voice when she'd said memory fades, ink doesn't. He didn't even have tattoos, had never wanted one. Now he wondered if there were things worth marking permanently. moments that deserved to be carried forward whether you liked it or not. Morning came without ceremony. No speeches, no announcements, just light pushing through windows and the quiet shuffle of people getting ready. The schedule said debrief at 10:00. No one complained. No one joked about coffee or sleep deprivation. Something had shifted. They moved slower, more deliberately. She arrived early. Always did. She stood near the side wall while the room filled, arms crossed loosely, weight balanced evenly on both feet. She wasn't assessing now. She was listening, to the cadence of footsteps, to the tone of voices, to what wasn't being said. The commander entered last, took his place, let the silence settle before speaking. Yesterday wasn't about proving capability, he said. It was about exposing character. No one argued. He gestured to her. Today continues that. She stepped forward, just one pace, enough. Yesterday, she said, you saw stories. She paused. Today, you're going to live with decisions. The exercise was simple on paper. Scenario planning under constraint, limited information, conflicting priorities, time pressure, moral ambiguity, the kind of thing that never shows up clean in reports. She divided them into smaller groups, mixed them deliberately, broke up comfort zones. She watched reactions, who resisted, who adapted. Brennan found himself grouped with people he barely knew. No friends, no familiar hierarchy, just responsibility. Good. She gave them a scenario, civilians, unclear threat, orders that didn't sit right, intel that was probably incomplete. She didn't rush them, let the discomfort bloom. Talk it through, she said, out loud. At first, the old habits surfaced. Someone tried to dominate the conversation. Someone dismissed concerns as overthinking. Someone pushed speed over clarity. She let it happen. Then she asked one question. Who lives with this decision afterward? The room quieted. That's not rhetorical, she added. Answer it. They stumbled at first, then slower, more careful. They began to see the shape of it, the long tail of consequence, the part that doesn't end when the mission does. She moved between groups, listening, occasionally redirecting, never telling them what to choose, only forcing them to confront why. When she reached Brennan's group, she stopped. They were arguing not loudly but intensely. One wanted to push forward, another wanted to hold. Brennan listened, actually listened. When he spoke, it wasn't to assert, it was to synthesize. We don't have enough certainty, he said, and the cost of being wrong is too high. Silence. Someone challenged him, so we just do nothing. No, he replied. We do the thing that lets us live with ourselves afterward. She watched his face as he said it, not proud, not performative, grounded. He'd learned. After the exercise, she gathered them again. No applause, no validation, just truth. You will never have perfect information, she said. If you wait for it, people die. If you ignore uncertainty, people die. Leadership is choosing which risk you're willing to carry. She looked around the room, and carrying it yourself. That landed. The session ended quietly. People lingered, not because they were told to, because they didn't want to rush back into noise yet. Brennan approached her again, slower this time, careful, not entitled. Chief, he said. She turned. I've been thinking, he continued, about what you said about asking questions. She waited. What do you carry, he asked, when no one's looking? It was the right question. She studied him for a moment, measuring intent. Then she answered, not fully, not everything. I carry names, she said, and promises. He nodded, didn't press. That mattered too. Later, as she walked off the base toward her rental car, she felt it again, that familiar mix of exhaustion and purpose. Teaching never healed the wounds, but it made them useful. It turned pain into something transferable, something that might save someone she'd never meet. As she drove away, the sun climbed higher over Coronado. Another day beginning. Another set of people walking forward slightly changed. She didn't know what they'd become. She only knew she'd done what she could. Sometimes that has to be enough. And sometimes, the strongest thing you can do isn't to fight or endure. It's to teach someone else how to choose better when it's their turn to carry the weight. Why did the air feel heavier when they realized this part wouldn't end with an answer? The room filled again just after noon, but it didn't sound the same. Boots still hit concrete, chairs still scraped. Yet something was missing, the casual noise, the unearned confidence. People sat with intention now. They waited instead of posturing. They listened instead of preparing to speak. She noticed immediately. She always did. She stood near the window this time, light cutting across one shoulder, the rest of her in shadow. Not staged, just where she happened to stop. The contrast fit her better than she would ever admit. "This isn't a continuation," she said once everyone settled. "It's a complication." A few brows tightened. "Good. You've learned how to slow down," she continued. "Now I want to see what you do when slowing down costs you." She tapped the remote. The screen came alive behind her. Grainy footage, a drone feed, a village layout that looked ordinary enough to be dangerous. No labels, no clear enemy positions, just movement, civilians, shadows, too many unknowns. "This scenario is real," she said. "Names changed, outcome didn't." That got their attention. "You're on overwatch for a partnered unit moving through this area," she explained. "They've requested guidance. They're tired, low on supplies. Command wants speed, higher wants results." She let the words settle. "And you see something that doesn't fit." She froze the frame, zoomed in. A small detail near the edge of the screen, a figure too still, too deliberate. "Talk to me," she said. "What do you do?" Hands went up slower this time. Answers were cautious, measured, people hedged, considered second-order effects. No one rushed. She nodded, not approval, just acknowledgement. Then she changed one variable. "You don't have time," she said. "The partnered unit is about to move into the open." She changed another. "Your comms are degrading." Another. "Command is pushing back on your hesitation." Now the room tightened. She watched the stress rise, the way shoulders crept upward, the way breath shortened. This was the edge, the place where theory began to slip. Brennan felt it in his chest, that old urge to decide fast, to sound certain. He fought it, let silence stretch, forced himself to sit with not knowing. He raised his hand. "We warn them," he said, "even if we're not sure." Someone challenged him immediately. "And if you're wrong, you spook the area, compromise the mission." Brennan nodded. "And if we're right, we save lives." She watched the exchange without interrupting. "What if command orders you not to?" someone else asked. Brennan hesitated. The room waited. "That's the decision," he said finally. "Whether following orders matters more than protecting people." Silence. She stepped forward. "This," she said quietly, "is where people learn who they are." She let the simulation play out, showed them what happened in reality. The moment missed, the ambush sprung, the aftermath no one puts in highlight reels. No gore, no dramatics, just consequence. A few people looked away. "Everyone in that partnered unit survived," she said. Relief rippled. But 2 civilians didn't. The relief collapsed. "They hesitated," she continued. "Not because they were careless, because they were afraid of being wrong." She turned off the screen. "You will never be punished for protecting people," she said, "but you will be haunted by the moments you didn't." That landed deeper than any reprimand. She didn't linger on it, didn't press guilt into wounds. She pivoted. "Let's talk about aftermath." Groans quiet but honest. "No," she said, "not paperwork, the part after." She spoke then about the long nights, the second guessing, the way decisions replay themselves at 3 in the morning, how your brain edits them, sharper each time until the weight becomes familiar, permanent. Everyone talks about what happens in the moment, she said. No one talks about what happens when it's over. She told them about sitting alone in a dark room, helmet still on, not ready to take it off because removing it felt like admitting the day had actually happened. About carrying responsibility long after adrenaline faded. That's why character matters, she said, because skill gets you through the moment, character gets you through the memory. No one spoke. She dismissed them early. Not as a reward. As mercy. Outside, the sky had shifted, clouds rolling in off the water, the light softer now, forgiving. She walked alone along the perimeter path, hands in her pockets, shoulders slightly hunched not from age or injury but from habit. She learned to make herself smaller when she wasn't working, less visible, less questioned. Her phone buzzed once. A name she hadn't expected. She stopped walking. Didn't answer immediately. Some connections never really end. They just go quiet. She tucked the phone away and kept moving. Some conversations were better left for another day. Behind her in the barracks, conversations were happening that wouldn't have happened a week earlier. Quieter, more honest, people admitting uncertainty without shame, people asking questions instead of asserting answers. Brennan sat on his bunk, boots off now, forearms resting on his knees. He stared at the faint tan line where a watch used to be. He thought about the scenario, about the hesitation, about the cost of being afraid to be wrong. He realized something uncomfortable. He'd always been more afraid of embarrassment than of consequence. That scared him more than anything she'd said. Later that evening she returned to the hall alone, not scheduled, not announced. She stood in the empty space where they'd all sat earlier. The room felt different now, charged, not with ego but with possibility. She closed her eyes briefly. Not to pray. To remember. Faces surfaced, voices, names, the ones who didn't get second chances, the ones whose lessons had arrived too late. This is for you, she murmured, not to the room, to the past. When she opened her eyes, the lights hummed softly overhead. The present waited. Tomorrow would bring the final test, not written, not simulated. Personal. And she knew not all of them would pass. Not because they weren't capable, but because some lessons can't be taught. They have to be chosen. And that choice, once made, changes everything. Why did the final test begin without a warning, without a briefing, without even a name? There was no schedule update, no call to assemble, no neat transition from one lesson to the next. That alone unsettled them. Training always announced itself. Preparation had a shape. This didn't. The message came individually. A short ping, a location, a time, nothing else. Brennan read it twice. His first instinct was irritation. Lack of clarity always felt like inefficiency. Then he caught himself, remembered her voice, remembered what uncertainty was meant to do. He grabbed his gear and left without asking questions. Others did the same. They arrived in staggered silence at a warehouse on the far edge of the base. No signage, no guards, just a door slightly ajar and light bleeding out onto the concrete. Inside, the air smelled of oil and dust and something old. Folding chairs were set in a loose circle. No screens, no equipment, just space. She stood in the center. No uniform, no rank visible, just a dark long-sleeve shirt, sleeves rolled down for once, tattoos hidden. She looked smaller like this, not weaker, more human. Sit, she said. They did. She waited until the last person arrived, until the circle closed, until escape, social or physical, felt harder. This isn't an evaluation, she said. There are no scores. A few shoulders relaxed, she noticed. That doesn't mean there are no consequences. The shoulders tightened again. She let a beat pass. "You've trained your bodies," she said. "You've tested your judgment. Now I want to see what you do when neither helps you." She reached down and placed a single object on the floor. A notebook. Worn, corners soft, cover stained with age and handling. "This belonged to someone who didn't come home," she said. No embellishment, no backstory, just that. "I want each of you," she continued, "to open it to a random page, read one line, then close it." A few looks were exchanged, confusion, discomfort. Brennan felt his pulse pick up. This wasn't tactical. There was no right move. He went first. The page fell open easily, as if it had been waiting. One line near the margin, written in hurried block letters. "If I don't make it, tell my sister I tried to be brave." His throat tightened unexpectedly. He closed the book carefully and passed it on. Others read, faces shifted. Some lines were mundane. Some were unfinished thoughts. Some were clearly written under stress, ink pressed too hard into paper. When the notebook completed the circle, she picked it up again, held it like it weighed more than it should. "This person," she said, "was competent, skilled, prepared." She paused. "They still died." The words sat heavy. "No one failed them," she continued. "There was no villain, no mistake you could point to and fix." She looked around the circle, met eyes one by one. "Sometimes," she said, "loss isn't a lesson, it's just loss." That landed harder than any scenario. "You will spend your careers trying to make meaning out of everything," she said. "That impulse will help you survive. It will also hurt you." She gestured to the notebook. "This isn't here to teach you how to win," she said. "It's here to teach you how to carry what doesn't resolve." No one spoke. Brennan felt something in his chest shift. He'd always believed that if you analyzed long enough, trained hard enough, you could prevent every bad outcome. Sitting here now, that belief felt fragile, almost childish. She stood there steady, letting the discomfort work. "Now," she said, "I want you to answer one question." She didn't rush it. "What do you do when the thing you were trained for breaks you?" The circle stayed silent. Good, she thought, they're actually thinking. One man spoke finally, voice low, "You push through." She nodded for a while. Another, "You compartmentalize." Again a nod, until the compartments overflow. A third, "You quit." No judgment, just acknowledgement. Brennan surprised himself by speaking next. "You choose who you become afterward." All eyes turned to him. She studied his face, long enough that he wondered if he'd overstepped. Then she nodded. "That's the one," she said. She crouched slightly, bringing herself closer to their level. "Trauma doesn't make you weak," she said. "Avoiding it does, pretending you're untouched does." She stood again. "You don't owe anyone perfection," she said. "You owe yourself honesty." She ended the session without ceremony. No summary, no motivational close. They left quietly, individually, carrying weight they hadn't arrived with. Brennan walked out into the evening air and realized his hands were shaking, not from fear, from recognition. He'd seen himself in that notebook, in those half-formed thoughts, in the idea that bravery was something you could promise in advance. Later that night he couldn't sleep, not because of stress, because of clarity. He understood now why she'd hidden her tattoos that day, why she didn't lead with them. They weren't proof, they were reminders of what remained after everything else stripped away. Across the base in her quarters, she sat on the edge of the bed holding the same notebook. Alone now. She traced the spine with her thumb, closed her eyes. "You did enough," she whispered, not to the book, to herself. Tomorrow she would leave. The program would continue without her, as it always did. What mattered wasn't whether they remembered her name. What mattered was whether, years from now, in a moment that broke them open, one of them would hear her voice, not telling them what to do, but reminding them they were allowed to choose who they became next. Sometimes, survival isn't about getting through the mission. It's about living honestly with what the mission takes. Why did leaving feel harder than staying ever had? She packed before sunrise, not out of habit, out of necessity. Dawn had a way of making things final. The quiet before the base woke up felt like a held breath, and she didn't want to be there when it released. Her bag was small. It always was. Years had taught her what mattered and what didn't. Extra space only invited ghosts. She moved through the corridor without looking back. The walls remembered enough for both of them. Outside, the air was cool and salt-laced. The sky hovered between night and morning, unsure which it wanted to be. She paused by the car, hand resting on the door, and allowed herself one last moment of stillness. Not nostalgia, inventory. You learn to take stock before you go, of injuries, of lessons, of debts you'll never fully repay. Her phone buzzed again. Same name. She didn't flinch this time. She answered. "I know," she said before the voice on the other end could finish the first sentence. "I felt it too." Silence, then breath, familiar, fragile. "We'll talk," she added, "just not today." She ended the call gently and slid the phone back into her pocket. Some conversations weren't meant to happen in borrowed spaces. Some truths needed room to land. She drove out as the base began to stir. No escort, no farewell. That was how she preferred it. Impact didn't need witnesses. Behind her, the day unfolded. Brennan stood on the parade deck longer than required, watching the road where the dust had already settled. He hadn't expected a goodbye. Still, the absence felt pointed, like a test he hadn't known he was taking. He thought of the notebook, the circle, the question that had followed him into sleep and out again. What do you do when the thing you were trained for breaks you? He didn't have a clean answer yet, but he knew the old one: deny, harden, perform, no longer fit. That felt like progress. Training resumed. Schedules reclaimed their authority. Orders arrived wrapped in familiar language. On the surface, nothing had changed, but underneath there was friction. Thought where there had been reflex, pauses where there had been momentum. It showed up in small ways. Someone asked for clarification instead of pretending to understand. Someone admitted doubt before it calcified into error. Someone chose to slow down when speed would have looked better on paper. Not all of them did. She'd known that. Growth isn't contagious unless people choose proximity. Brennan found himself intervening once quietly when a joke drifted toward someone's appearance. Not aggressively, just a look, a single sentence. Enough. The joke died where it stood. That surprised him more than it should have. Weeks later, a mission briefing went sideways. Conflicting intel, pressure from above. The room tightened. Old instincts surged. He felt it then, the moment she'd warned them about. The one where certainty tempts you because it feels like relief. He didn't take it. He asked a question instead. The room slowed, friction sparked, but the outcome changed, not dramatically, just enough. Two people went home that night who might not have. No one applauded. That was fine. Across the country, she stood in a quiet kitchen with sleeves rolled up, tattoos bare again, hands wrapped around a mug she'd reheated twice and still forgotten to drink. Civilian life had its own kind of noise, softer, more insistent, less forgiving of silence. She'd taken a contract teaching somewhere else. Different faces, same patterns, the work continued, it always would. Some nights were still hard. Some memories refused to stay filed. They rose without warning, a smell, a sound, a name said too casually. She let them come now, didn't fight as much. Fighting took energy she no longer wanted to spend. She learned something teaching those operators. You don't outrun pain. You integrate it. One afternoon, she stopped at a small shop near the water. Impulsively, she hadn't planned to. The sign was hand-painted, uneven, honest. Inside, the artist didn't ask questions, just listened. She chose a small mark, simple, no coordinates, no names, just a line that curved and closed back on itself. Meaning, the artist asked. Continuity, she replied. When it was done, she watched the ink settle into skin, not a memory, a reminder. That survival didn't have to look like resistance. It could look like adaptation. Months passed. A message arrived one evening from a number she didn't recognize. Just wanted you to know, we chose differently today. No details, none needed. She stared at the screen longer than necessary, then typed back. Good. She set the phone down and stepped outside. The sky was wide and unburdened, stars beginning to show. She breathed in, let it fill her. She thought about the room full of people who had laughed once, about how laughter had given way to listening, about how listening had given way to choice. She hadn't saved anyone. She'd never claimed to. But she had shifted something. And sometimes, that's the only kind of redemption available. Far away, Brennan sat alone after another long day, forearms resting on his knees, watching dusk creep across the horizon. He rolled up his sleeve and studied his bare skin, thought about ink, about permanence, about what deserved to be carried forward. He didn't mark anything yet. He didn't need to. Not every lesson had to be written. Some lived in how you moved through the world afterward. He stood, shouldered his bag, and headed inside. Tomorrow would come whether he was ready or not. That was fine. He was learning how to meet it honestly. And somewhere between places, between roles, between past and future, a woman with stories written into her skin kept walking quietly forward. Not untouched, not unbroken, but whole in a way that didn't ask permission. Because strength, real strength, isn't loud. It doesn't demand belief. It shows up when no one is watching, chooses carefully, carries responsibility without applause, and leaves behind people who think more deeply than they did before. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.